I have probably talked with thousands and thousands of Japanese people. One of the things you will struggle with the most if you don't know, there's tons of unwritten rules, especially if you want to work in Japanese TV. If you do it yourself, you have all the freedom. You can do whatever you want. Why high up here is work for Japanese TV. If you want to make it, you need to put in the work.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Cathy Cat.
Hey, podcast kittens, it's Cathy Cat. Are you ready to do what you love and love what you do today?
Thank you so much for coming and bringing your energy to the table. We want to hear your story today about how you went from Germany to Japan and entered the Japanese media sphere, working for some of the big TV channels, presenting shows, being an MC for radio, and also doing a lot of work on YouTube with your personal channel, with Ask Japanese, where you went on the streets of Tokyo and Japan interviewing Japanese people about what they think of various topics. So let's get down to it right away and go back to the beginning. What is your origin story with Japan? What is your first contact with Japan?
First of all, I gotta say it's really nice to be interviewed because usually I do the interviewing, so it's actually interesting to be on the other side.
Well, I'm a little nervous because later I'll be on the Cat with Beard podcast.
Yes, you will be on our podcast later.
And,
we'll switch it on you, and then you get to answer to us too as well.
But now is my chance to just ask you questions. So,
all right, I'm gonna.
Where did it start?
This. All right, where did it start? It started all the way back in Munich. So the whole thing started with me actually being part of a musical group that used Japanese themes. So it was kind of like a cosplay musical group. That's more of a thing, I guess, in Germany that we do. You don't do it so much. I think I've seen it not so much in Japan, that you combine cosplay with also acting and singing on stage. But that was my first kind of real introduction into Japanese language, and I was even singing Japanese songs even though I couldn't understand the lyrics.
Wow.
But it was like my first introduction to the culture, and then I had the chance to go on a school exchange, and once I went over I was like, wow, this is great. And
where'd you go for that exchange?
I went to Tokyo. So I went to Tokyo, had my very first exchange, and then I went cold turkey, and I tidied away all my otaku stuff and all my geekiness and decided, okay, I'll come back for one more year. Went on the work and travel, came back and tried to not indulge in any kind of geeky otaku stuff and just take the culture in as is. And I still liked it. And then I thought, well, I would like to come back. So I went to the UK, and then to get good qualification, because I'm originally German and I wanted to show that actually I can speak English very well. So I got my master's there, and then afterwards I came to Japan.
You said you put away a little bit your otaku geekiness when you came back to Japan. Why did you decide to leave this aside to kind of experience it instead of bringing it with you?
I kind of didn't want to have the pop culture taint my experience of Japanese culture. And also, like, I didn't want to just go to say, because I love anime, manga, and music, I am here now. I wanted to first go, okay, I love all of this, and I know I love this, but let's close it away for just 1 year and see what else there is. So to experience it in a different way. And then I gotta be honest, I'm like, okay, I still love everything. So now I can open that box again, and as you can tell, I'm still a big geek or otaku, and I still love what I do and indulge in the things I liked.
When you were in Japan for this longer period, and then you said you went to the UK to get your qualifications, but you were already thinking, oh, I want to go back to Japan, I want to come back. What was the thing that made you decide to, I want to spend more and more time in Japan?
I think the first time you come, if you come on an exchange to Japan, Japan is amazing with their hospitality. So the omotenashi culture, hospitality. So first when I came as an exchange student, people were super nice and did a lot of things for me. And I thought, this is great, but this is not the real experience. I want to not be a guest. So the second time I came, the work and travel, is still a good experience, but you're still a guest. You're only there for a year, max. You can be there for shorter. So I thought, what is Japan like when I'm not a guest? So I want to go one more step up and actually work here, properly work here, and be part of the culture. So that was one thing for me. And another thing was a lot of people, and that's actually advice I give on my YouTube channel, is always when people want to come to Japan, they ask, okay, what do I need to bring to the table? And I generally do recommend people to get a degree, because I got told the same thing when I came during work and travel. Like, I could have stayed, but a lot of people said, get yourself a degree to make sure that you can stay here comfortably. The average Japanese person gets a degree So if you can't bring a degree to the table, you definitely have a much better experience of Japan as well.
Well, without a degree, it's also very difficult to acquire a visa.
Exactly.
Especially a work visa. And if you come on a student visa, you'll still need to get a degree in Japan to later do a work visa. But then after coming here and wanting to go a step deeper, you get your degree. And degrees, multiple ones.
Degrees. I have one master's in drama and education. So I was thinking actually originally of teaching, but also using drama. And the second one is in science fiction.
Science fiction?
Science fiction.
Like you studied science fiction novels or movies? Or
yes, exactly. Science fiction studies. So the University of Liverpool has the biggest collection of science fiction material in the entire world. And I thought, that's interesting. I find that a little bit more interesting than Shakespeare, so I'm going to do that.
What do you study in science fiction studies?
For example, like a real good classic would be Utopia, Dystopia. And I think that also goes back to the roots of me being German. We had, for a time when Germany was split, we had two ways of running a country. And each one can be seen as a utopia or a dystopia, depending on from your angle. So I think that's maybe where my interest in utopian, dystopian theory comes from. Because I wanted to know how humans will always try to build an ideal society, but we will always fail because we're flawed.
Interesting. And then you'd
this
have...
is going totally away from YouTube.
So let's bring it back. But utopian, dystopian, if set in kind of a futuristic Japan, you'd have Blade Runner, I guess, as an example of a classic.
Blade Runner has lots of influences from different cultures there as well.
And you study this, you go through it, and... you have to come back to Japan, but with work this time, right? You've used up your working holiday visa. You've done your exchange. How did you come back to kind of settle here for a longer period? Well,
the original one, which is what I thought I would do, was to be a teacher and use drama, so drama skills, to teach. That was the first where I came here. But while I was doing that, so I was doing full-time working in a school, teaching kids English through drama. So we did little plays and we were singing and such. But on the weekends, I started actually continuing with my channel, the Cathy Cat YouTube channel, because I started that in the UK. And I would dress up and I would go to events and film all of that and edit it in the middle of the night. So my weekends were doing that. And then one day I got the chance to help interview for another channel that is called Kawaii Patin, and go to the Harajuku Fashion Walk and interview people on the street and then edit that and pass that on. So I would kind of be working during the week and then work on the weekend on my personal stuff.
So you were already really into Harajuku fashion at that time, and this was kind of like a core part of what you were doing in Japan.
Yeah, I started actually wearing it in the UK. The community in the UK was really great and welcoming. There's a bit more freedom of fashion in the UK than in Germany, I gotta admit. So it was my first experience to dress up and go with girls to tea parties and have like tons of fun. And I kind of brought that with me when I then came to Japan.
How do you define this kind of, you called it a community just now, Harajuku fashion. Mm-hmm. Is it a lifestyle? Is it just a type of dress? Or is it more like a community of people that want to do certain types of activities together?
I think it can be what you want it to be. You don't have to be a lifestyle, fashionista. You can just wear it if you want to wear it casually. You can slowly work your way up. It's okay to sometimes just start with one accessory and then work your way up. You don't have to give it a title. I think in the end, fashion is there to make us feel good. And it should be what you want it to be to make yourself shine and feel good and express yourself. So I don't like putting labels on things in that way, because in the end, you should just have fun with fashion.
Was there a different perception then of this kind of Harajuku fashion back in the UK, where you were already wearing it in part of the community, and here in Japan where you started going to the actual Harajuku area to interview people on the streets wearing the...
I think in the UK, but also in other places in Europe, the big difference is that generally you wear it as a group, which makes sense, because if you stand out from the crowd, people are going to say things you don't want to hear, right? People are going to be mean, weird. You get catcalled, all of that. So a lot of girls like to dress up in groups and like meet for tea parties. You have the safety in numbers. You have like-minded people that you can share ideas with. While in Japan, you can just literally wear it all by yourself on the street. You're not going to get people being mean or horrible to you. Maybe even people will actually say something nice rather than something mean. And I think that's probably a big difference. Also, I often see girls in Harajuku when I interview people. Sometimes one girl is completely dressed up and the other one wears jeans and a t-shirt, and that's fine. So there's no pressure to like both dress up the same way or go together to an event. It's a lot more liberal in that way.
So what was it like back then when you went on the streets of Harajuku to do your first street interviews? Were you nervous at all?
Well, first I started with kawaii patin, and then I transitioned over to Ash Japanese because it was part of the same company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first time I went out, it was always a bit hard to who to talk to, because all of these street interviews are organic, which means we don't call people in advance and say, hey, meet us on the street so we can take an interview with you. We would just stand there from morning, sometimes till night, and just wait till the right person comes around, or well, like people comes around that actually says yes. Because I have probably talked with thousands and thousands and thousands of Japanese people, but a lot say no. So you might have to stay there all day to get enough people to actually have a full interview. But I think that's the strength of Ask Japanese as well. It is literally organic. And also people that we got have different opinions. So we're not pushing the same opinion in an interview because that's the opinion we want. We have one person who says, yes, I think so. And another person who thinks, no, not at all. And we put that in the same interview to show that there's a variety of opinions of Japanese people here in Japan. And now we also interview people visiting as well.
What is a tell that a person might be an interesting person to interview or ask questions to?
If they already walk down the street and they're like with their friends and they're laughing and having fun, that's already a person that I want to interview. If they're walking down the street looking like it's been raining and they're really, really in a bad mood, then you'd leave them alone.
Ask Japanese and Kawaii Patin, you mentioned they're from like the same company.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do street interviews. What is kind of the idea behind all of this? Because it's one of the longest running shows, I think, of street interviews in Japan. There are many street interviewers nowadays. Some have blown up on social media, but are more recent and are maybe sometimes doing more controversial things. Whereas I feel the videos or the interviews you're doing are more lighthearted, if I may say so.
I would say entertaining, I guess, in a sense. Also, having done this, like, I think we are not just the only ones. I think Asian Boss was there as well, and a couple of people I call it the first generation of street interviewers. So we've been all doing it for 9 to 10 years now. And there were already some street interviewers who would do the heavy topics, but with us, we decided to keep it entertaining and show the fun side of Japan. And sometimes it will be very trivial things. I remember very distinctively that we once had an interview where we just asked people, what do you eat for breakfast? How do you like your breakfast egg? Which, the comments would be like, why are you even asking this? But it's also part of Japan. It's part of like learning a little bit about the culture in a way and just what people are thinking. It doesn't always have to be the hard-hitting, very kind of edgy view-chasing questions, in my opinion. Sometimes it's okay to just ask things because you're curious and you want to know, and it's not going to get, like clickbait.
I think there is a fascination in society with what other people think. Like, just normal people on the street think about any kind of topic, right? Because street interviews have been around for a long time and they're still around and they're growing and people keep watching. What do you think makes a good street interview for you?
A good street interview. Okay, first of all, let me quickly take this out of my head because I have the feeling this is getting picked up by the mic. So I'm going to place this right here for a moment. I think a good street interview is not manipulated. That's because it's easy to find someone who will say something edgy and then call them in and get that. That is that person's opinion though, and you cannot apply it to the entirety of the Japanese people. And I think there's been a couple of interviews recently that were very much pushing it to the edge, which, you're a content creator, that's fine if you want to do that. But then other Japanese content creators were saying, why are you showing Japanese girls as if they're all the same, or like creating that image of Japanese girls are like this and for example, they cheat a lot or something like that. And then is that really, I think it's always important to, first of all, not make the person who's getting interviewed too much the center of hate. I think there's a responsibility from us as an interviewer to not expose people to harm. So if sometimes people were saying very bad things that you instantly know they will get in trouble for, we think about it's also our responsibility. Do we put that out? Can we take that responsibility for that? Or do we actually say, okay, let's take that part out and just keep it like a little bit safer for the internet? That, and also just making sure that you also let the viewers know. And I mean, that's, you know, in the mind of every viewer as well. Just because person A, B, and C say that, it doesn't mean that everyone is like that. So please take those street interviews, I think all of them, with a pinch of salt. Just because you got 5 people who say one thing, there's probably 50 people who say the other thing, kind of thing. So that's why I like mixing people. But hey, who knows? Things will be changing. Like, for example, over time, having done these street interviews over time, I could see general opinions shift a little bit.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I will see this fashion shift and stuff like that, but you can see like general opinions shift a little bit. I also find, because we now have more of these Japanese street interviews, a lot of people are more cautious. Japanese people are more cautious about taking these street interviews. Because some people have like interviewed a couple of girls in a context that it maybe got pushed a little bit to extremes, and then that went viral, and then they're like, ooh, I kind of don't want to say that, or I don't want to get interviewed. So people have always been very cautious in Japan in the first place with interviews, but a lot of people are also like, you know what, let's not do it at all.
Do you have some very memorable interviews that you've done that went completely unexpected?
There is one that comes to mind, but I don't think I should mention that one. In summer last year, we did an interview with some girls who are very surprisingly outspoken. And I guess that's one of the things that surprises me. Usually interviewing people on the streets of Tokyo, people don't really go overboard with some of the comments they're saying. But we were on the beach and they were having a good time. So they were very, very outspoken, and they were saying some really crazy things, and it just went in a completely different direction. And there were a couple of words that just went over my head that I haven't even heard about, that were all of a very adult nature that I didn't even know about. So at the end, we had to look at the interview and go like, all right, that was a bit too wild. Let's cut that a little bit. That was probably a weird one. Also, one of the interviews, a girl came and she grabbed the microphone away from me, turned toward the camera and started talking. I like so-and-so. He's great. He's a wonderful person. I would like you guys to all know that he is great and I love him. And then she gives me back my microphone. I'm like, we're going to keep that in.
This is, I guess, the risk, not the risk, but in a good way, the unexpected nature of spontaneous street interviews, where you never really know what's about to happen.
Literally, you never know. Sometimes it's absolutely wild cards. I mean, the most disheartening things is when you do an entire interview and you've been standing there, and then they suddenly go, you know what? I don't want to be in this interview. And then all that work is lost, but you have to respect that. Then you go, okay, gotcha. Gotta wait for another couple of hours now.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough loss. But I want to get back to the point where you mentioned you've seen a shift on many different opinions over the years of you doing this. Fashion being one of them. What other are the main kind of areas where you've seen a shift in maybe public opinion generally from the many street interviews you've done?
I think at the start we had a lot of, when we, for example, compared foreigners and Japanese people, we had at the start a lot of people who said, I've never actually met a foreigner or never really interacted with a foreigner. And that has now changed over the last 9 years, especially right now with a lot of tourists coming in. It's changed, so people are actually much more accustomed to having foreigners around. And so the opinions are a bit more like, yeah, I would like to, maybe date a foreigner or, spend more time with a foreigner, get to know a different language. So people are a little bit more open right now, at least the demographic that we're interviewing right now.
When was that when you first started doing those interviews? That was a few years ago.
9 years ago, yeah.
Is this kind of what got you started into being more interested in media work?
I think I always wanted to work in media, starting with like musicals and being on stage and all of that. And even when I was a kid, I did like a little radio show that I recorded on tape. So we're kind of doing the adult version of this here right now with the podcast.
Do you still have the tapes?
I still have them.
Oh, that's a nice memory to keep.
Yeah, I would do a radio show with me and myself, so that was quite a thing. So I think it's always the fascination of being in media and creating entertaining content for people. And again, I think that at the heart of us Japanese, it's like it's supposed to entertain people. It shouldn't be there to make people feel bad, or it shouldn't be there to create a flame war or like a fire war. It should be bringing you something about Japan or about people. Of course, sometimes there will be some topics, but I also found out that our viewers of Ask Japanese are not the ones who want to see the kind of controversial things. They're just really happy to hear what's going on in Japan, and we're leaving the controversial things to everyone else who wants to do it.
How long have you kept doing this kind of a weekday teaching weekend, going to ask people on the street, until you were like at the point, I need to make a change, I need to make a decision? I
was lucky. It was like just the first year. So the first year was like teaching kids, and then also on the weekend working with Kawaii Patin. And then after that, like that year was over and it was time to renew my contract, I was like, hey guys, I would really love to work with you. You already know how I work, and I would really love to be part of the team. And they were like, we were literally just looking for someone who can speak 2 languages fluently. Welcome on board. And so I joined the company and first started with Kawaii Patin, more like fashion, and then moved over to Ask Japanese, where we ask Japanese people.
You've since also started working for Japanese TV and larger kind of productions. How did you get into that? Actually,
again, most of it is me being me and being outgoing and going out on the streets. I think one of my first contacts in Japanese TV literally happened by me going up to them, giving them a little handmade card on which I handmade had written my YouTube and going like, hi, this is me. And then they interviewed me about something. It was at an event, and they remembered me for a year. And then the time came around when they were looking for someone who would be able to speak 2 languages fluently, but also is already a content creator. And they gave me a ring. I went in for an audition. They liked me, and that's how it happened. So a lot of these things are not your company got this for you. A lot of things are hustle. I think everything that I have so far has been by me hustling and not giving up. And it's no viral things. It's like steady, slow growth, but keeping at it, keeping the grind up, and just not giving up.
That's an interesting point. I think a lot of podcast guests have made here as well. Of course, some create content, it goes viral, or you have a lucky streak. But for most of our guests, it's always been, you have to put in the work.
Yes. Generally, that's the rule of thumb, I think.
In your case as well, I think you speak a very high level of Japanese, interviewing all those people on the streets, being on Japanese TV. So you have to learn the language and put in the work to kind of get your career started in Japan. Do you think this is the key to success here?
If you want to make it in Japan, you need to put in the work. Literally, you need to put in the work. And especially right now, with so many people coming in and starting to love Japan, I am all go for that. Come love Japan, as long as you respect the culture and the people. There's now a lot of competition as well, though, so you can't just wait for things to come to you. You excuse me. You really need to step it up and put in the work, learn the language, learn the mannerism. And especially if you want to work in Japanese TV, you can't take liberties as much as you might be able to take as an influencer. There's still a big difference between working for TV or working on your own social media.
What will be those main differences for you now, kind of doing the content creation side for a company, but for yourself as well? And we'll get to that in a bit. But now also for a kind of TV, national TV channel.
Okay, I think that's almost 3 questions in one. If you create content for a company, then you have to obviously go with the company's guidelines and the rules and such. So in this case, it would be WOW, who's the main company, and then we would go with what the rules were for that. And when they told us, please, go out for this or film that. So that's one thing. So you have less freedom there. You have more freedom if it's your own stuff, because then you can just do whatever you want to do. You can ask whatever you want to do, or you can create videos in whichever shape or form you like. Of course, the more you do things you just like to do, the less you're likely to hit certain trends or stuff like that. And then if you go for a 3-tier system. If you do it yourself, you have all the freedom. You can do whatever you want. Literally, just hop in front of the camera, do whatever you want. Next one, if you create online content for a company, you have to definitely see there's clients. You have to make sure that you make happy. You have to make your company happy, your colleagues. What are the rules about creating thumbnails and subtitles and all of that? So there's a lot of rules there already. But then the why high up here is work for Japanese TV, because there is so many unwritten rules. And I think that's one of the things you will struggle with the most if you don't know. There's tons of unwritten rules in the Japanese media, and there's also very strict hierarchy, and there's less space for people who take liberties. I think if you come in and you do a lot of demands and you're not on time, and you don't know how to greet your seniors properly, and you can't turn up on time and all of these things properly, and then you're probably not going to be there for long.
What was your first day like on Japanese TV?
On Japanese TV, I've been there a couple of times, to be honest. So it's difficult to say. Every show, the first day you're nervous. The first day you'll be nervous. I'm nervous here right now. First
Me
time
too.
sitting with you. Yeah, my voice is like one pitch higher. Now, the first time is always the most nervous thing, and it is for you to make sure you can keep the nervous in a little bit, and make sure that you also greet everyone. Like basic things that are so important that some people don't notice. It's to greet everyone properly, say hi to everyone properly, be early. Those are the basics. You already win a little bit if you're there early. If you waltz in late because your train was slightly delayed or you didn't find your way, people will understand it, but it's not a good start.
It's interesting because they seem to be such obvious things that are not necessarily restricted to Japanese culture and Japanese companies, and everywhere you work you'd think, well, you have to be on time. But it sounds like it's particularly strict here, and you've seen people kind of make those mistakes in your years working on Japanese TV, and how it suddenly undermines anything else they do beyond that.
Is that a question?
There was no question. I was just leading up the kind of continuing, building on your point of, because you really emphasized the need to be punctual and how you talk to your superiors and their hierarchy.
Hierarchy is definitely a big one. I sometimes see influencers who don't have to do that because they already have certain amount of numbers. But generally, being on time and being respectful for the people around you, that are basic human skills that I think everyone needs to have in their skill belt. So, just don't be a horrible person.
One of the shows you're working on is the Japan Railway Journal.
Yes.
So I'm really curious of how you got to be the host of that specific show, because you come from a background of interviewing people on the street, of Harajuku fashion, and now you're talking about trains in Japan, which are a big thing.
I was actually before that already on NHK. So there was a program called Newsroom Tokyo that was actually high pressure because it was news. Things were live. So I would go, we had pre-record a section where we would travel Japan, and then I would sit in the studio and report about that section live. Wonderful time, great experience. And then the pandemic came. And then the pandemic came, and everything kind of changed during the pandemic for all of us, right? So after that, I got contacted by someone from NHK saying, hey, there's a program I think you might like. You might want to maybe do an audition and speak with them. And I looked at the program, loved the program, and I spent probably a week watching every episode I could find online. Then I would start researching into the Japanese train system, about the history and the past. I would buy books about trains, and I would have, in the end, when I went to talk with people in the program, I had a book this thick, full with everything about every episode, the different types of trains, and said, look, I'm going to be honest here. I'm not a pro on this subject, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to give it all my best. And they decided to go with me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Can you tell us a little bit about how those shows work? When you film a show, how long does it take? How much prep work goes into making one show? And how does it unfold not behind the scenes per se, but kind of the general idea of it?
I've been working for different shows, and as a person in front of the camera, you get to see different parts of it. And generally what I would say, if you're a viewer, you will see the tip of the iceberg. You will literally just see the best and the most pristine thing, but there underneath it is like this whole triangle of things of people that work together. Oh, the cameraman and the sound technicians and the producer and the directors, and then maybe the boss who decides to say something else. And some programs have the chance to get like double checked. So you have like a double check. Everyone goes in, looks at it, sees if there's anything. And especially if it's for serious TV, there are some things that in the check, well, you have to double check. Like, for example, in the background, you were walking past a tree, but behind the tree is a house. And on that house, you can make out the colors of probably a poster about a political party. Boom, you have to take that out.
Wow.
So you have to be very, very careful with that. Like, it might not, it was not on purpose, but is there, you need to take that out. There's a lot of like things that go on the lower part of the iceberg to actually make everything work smoothly.
So in these larger productions, you really have one person for each role, so to say. And your role will be really just to prepare the hosting part, and you're not necessarily responsible for setting cameras, for organizing things that go behind.
If you work for TV, everyone has their role. And sometimes what I've noticed, I'm a creator, right? So I'm used to picking up the camera and I'm doing the mic and all of that. But actually, if you do that, you might actually be stepping on someone else's toes. So you're like, sometimes I got told like, that's not your job. But I'm used to doing everything myself because I have to do everything myself for my YouTube channel, that I'm like, oh, well, I'm cool with helping. It's great. I can do that. But people will be like, no, that's not your job. You need to focus on doing that. So I like both because on one part, I'm like, okay, this is like the prepared meal. I've seen this. One of my colleagues once explained it to me. He explained it as cooking. One person brings the ingredients. A lot of other people, they make that meal. And in the end, for us as presenters, it's to present that meal. And so that is what you do when you work for TV. But when you're a YouTuber like me, you have to do all of it. You have to prepare the food, cut the food, cook the food, and present the food in the end.
Working for NHK in a very traditional Japanese environment, how was it in terms of Japanese language as an experience for you to kind of dive into this very kind of corporate environment?
I first thought my Japanese was great because I have fluent conversations with the people on the streets of Tokyo. But once I started working on TV, I realized, okay, there's like technical terms I don't know, or there is words that are used in a different context. For example, and that one threw me off right on the first day. You come in, and one of the shows I was doing was starting at 11 o'clock at night. That wasn't for NHK, that was for a different program, but it was starting at 11 o'clock at night. And I walked into the studio, and everyone said, Ohayo gozaimasu, which in my textbook Japanese means good morning. And everyone was greeting me with Ohayo gozaimasu, good morning. And I was like, huh, what? Good morning? Do you say good morning at 11 p.m.? Turns out that is a term in the entertainment industry because you don't know how long people have been working. Maybe they worked all through the night. You're supposed to say Ohayo gozaimasu. That's the right way of saying hi. Interesting.
Now, how many years have you been kind of working on these TV show productions?
Probably 8 years, I think. When I started, 8 years or 9 years ago, I think I started to go into Japanese media. I think what actually one of the guests on the podcast has said, they believe that it's very hard actually for foreigners to break into it unless you have the role of a foreigner in a certain way. So you need to always think, what am I bringing to the table that a Japanese person cannot bring to the table? So where are your skills? What makes you a little bit different? And I think that's the same thing if you want to work in Japan. If you work at a company, what are you bringing to the table that a Japanese person necessarily might not be able to bring to the table? Again, that's why you need to get that degree that I was talking about. Get yourself a degree to make sure that you have some skills that you bring under a belt before you join. So I think for acting, it's really hard in Japan. I was hoping to also go and act a little bit in Japan. But generally, if you look at Japanese dramas, they're still written in a way where it's very rare to have a foreigner in there. And if at all there's a foreigner in there, they may be asking for the way, or they're like the token foreigner kind of thing. So hopefully that will change in the future, because I think a lot of people have the dream of acting in Japan. And I would love to do that too. But it might not be working for TV media at this point in time. There's only small roles. But you could always go and join a theater company, and there's some very passionate, dedicated theater companies here in Japan, and maybe work with them.
Yeah, I think quite a few foreigners have come here with a dream of acting and realize how difficult it actually is to get a role, simply because I think you just mentioned precisely the main issue being, for most Japanese dramas, there is no role of foreigner, and if there is, it's just such a minor role that you're not really acting very much.
Exactly, yeah.
You did a show on trains. So before the pandemic, you said you also had your own segment where you would go and travel to different areas. What is one of your favorite areas that you've gotten to go through?
I will always remember my shoot going to Aomori Prefecture. So Aomori is like up in the north where they're famous for apples and such, but Aomori has a certain magic, and there is a train called the Tohoku Emotion. That train was discontinued after the earthquake and disaster for a while, and then I brought it back, and it's a tourist train. But I don't know if you wonderful viewers and listeners here, if you know and ever have heard about Japanese tourist trains, it's a whole new level. You don't just go on it to go from A to B, you go for the experience. So they have, first of all the design inside the train is designed in that kind of regional style, handicraft from that region, and then you get a delicious meal which uses ingredients from the prefecture, plus even the boxes in which the items are also local handcraft, and then you go and have beautiful view. And the thing that really caught me is, no matter whether it's raining or in winter or in summer, when people see this train, the Tohoku Emotion, go past, they celebrate the return of the train because it was discontinued for a while. And they, like, literally this old lady in the field, she will like see the train go up and wave at the train. And then there's a certain section where supporters, no matter in which weather, will bring out big flags and wave and celebrate the return of the train. I was crying. I was just so moved. So Aomori will always hold a special place in my heart.
I mean, there is a real fascination with trains in Japan, I think more than anywhere else. And even on my commuter train that I take every morning, there's always one person, especially on an evening, that will stand at the very front and just film.
And take pictures and have fun, exactly.
And arrive at the last stop, get out, take a photo of the train there, and go on the next one that goes back, just to ride every single train. And they will have a specific year and make like a car, and they would want to experience all of this. You mentioned tourist trains having these kind of unique experiences, and Japan has quite a few. There's Aomori one. There is one, I think, going
tourist
between
trains.
Nara and Kyoto. There's the luxury one, the 7-star, is it? I think that goes from Kyushu to somewhere. Is there one train in particular that you've learned about, or one train journey that you would really recommend?
That would have been the one I was just talking about. Yeah, that was definitely like my absolute number one.
Yeah.
It's just the experience was so fantastic that I can. But I think if any of the wonderful listeners here are considering to go on a tourist train, I would say book them in advance. It's sometimes because Japanese people love their trains. Some of those tourist trains are so popular that you have to book them months in advance. Some of them early? You have to really book months in advance. So even when we went there for a TV program, we do not get special treatment. That's one of the things I find interesting. Just TV shows and programs sometimes do not get special treatment, as you thought you would, right? But they wanted to go on that train, couldn't get a ticket, and then suddenly get a call saying, we got the ticket, someone has canceled, we're going now. So there's no special preferential treatment, which I do respect. Like, I prefer it that way, I think, also, because there's other people who've been waiting for years, or months, not maybe years, but months. So why do you give special treatment to TV when there's maybe a big fan who's been waiting? So that kind of stuff is also quite interesting.
So Aomori, definitely the number one. I've never actually done any of those tourist trains, even though there are quite a few in the Kansai area. But
it's definitely a wonderful experience.
I'll add it on my to-do list. Looking back at your experience now, 9 years, you kind of came here with this idea of, you first came as an exchange, then working a holiday, and you wanted to go deeper and deeper. And now for the last 9 years, you've really been settled and a part of this society, working with media, doing your own media, continuing your own channel as well. Has your perspective changed a little bit on Japan generally?
On Japan, I don't think it has changed. For me, it literally has, over the last years, more and more the thought of, I think the culture works with my the kind of person I am.
Mm-hmm.
The most, there's a lot of I think Japan is a group harmony culture where you you think of the other person in your group more than you think of yourself. And I do like that way of thinking. Of course, there's plus and minus to both sides, but I like that people check on each other. So for example, coming from Germany, right? In Germany is usually the one who's the tallest and the loudest just usually gets what they want to do, and we go whatever they say and we just follow. It might be different in your circle of friends, I hope it is. But in Japan, it's generally like you ask what everyone wants to do, and then you find a harmony solution saying, you want to go drink coffee, I want to go shopping, how about, and then the third person maybe wants to go to see the cinema or watch a movie. And then we try to find a way that we can all incorporate what we all want to do.
You go to the shopping mall that has a coffee shop and a cinema.
Fantastic. There you go. Sorted. I think they kind of like reading the room and kyotsukau, like to look a little bit more for other person's need than your own. Mm-hmm. It's just a part of Japanese culture I highly respect, and I wish we had that a little bit more all over the world.
Yeah, it is very nice. And when you spend more and more time here in Japan, you sometimes forget how much people here are kind of mindful of their environment.
I think the live and let live is a big thing here in Japan. Everyone has their own life. Everyone has their own thing. Why you bother making someone feel bad on the street for what they're wearing? So I love dressing the way I dress and go out on the streets of Tokyo dressed up like this, because that's my way of self-expression, and that's my message as well to people. Say, hey, do what you love what you do. I always keep repeating that on my channel too, because life is very short, and if you kind of deny yourself the things you love, you deny yourself a piece of life. So why don't you just do the things you want to do, dare to wear what you want to wear, or dare to travel to the country you want to go to, because our time here is not like there's no promise of tomorrow, so might as well do today what you really want to do.
That was very profound. I have no response to this, but this was very nice.
It's just, I like so many people who watch my interviews or engage with my personal content. The Cathy Cat channel is more about fashion. And then a lot of people come into my Twitch streams, because I started Twitch during the pandemic, and a lot of people ask me like, oh, I want to go to Japan, but... Or, I wish I could speak Japanese, but, and I have, but I hope to give more people the inspiration to actually go out and do the thing they want to do. So, for example, in my fan community, a lot of people recently started picking up Japanese, and I will try and give them advice on how I learned it, or give them advice on good apps that you can use, because you got to start it now. Like, in 3 years' time, you wish you would have started today. Yes, start today on the things that you want to do. So I think we need to focus more on what do you really want to do and go after that.
Like you starting your Twitch channel, which is kind of one of your latest endeavors.
It was at first I got told like, oh, Twitch, is a bit of a rough community, that kind of thing, but they really have opted up their moderation game and made it a bit more of a safer space for women to join that, and you don't just have to game anymore. Now there's a really huge category on Twitch that I'm joining, which is just chatting. So you sit down in your studio and you start chatting with people, and I think especially during the pandemic has given so many people a wonderful outlet to find a community that they vibe with well, get some information, find some new friends, and then, learn maybe something new. So that's probably what I love as an outlet on Twitch, is I'm not tied to just doing street interviews. I'm not tied to just doing fashion. I'm not tied to just doing gaming. I can do anything. So I can roll in and use my drama and say, today I'm going to act as if I'm a California girl, and I'm going to try and put on some California girl accent. And then I get my viewers to help me with some California girl words, like legit. And, I have a little bit of fun with that. And then obviously when I break character, everyone has fun watching me break character. So that's one thing I can do. Or then next time I do IRL, which means I grab my phone and take people out on the streets in Tokyo, walk around Tokyo, explain where I am. For example, we're here in Shibuya, and look at this. They're over there. For example, there is the large Godzilla statue. Check that one out. So it's like, I like bringing that variety, because I'm not tied to what a lot of people have right now, which is being tied to the YouTube algorithm. Right now on YouTube, you have to kind of create the same kind of content again and again and again to hit the algorithm. We don't have to do that when you're streaming, because there's no algorithm for that yet. Hopefully it won't come. So you can, again, do more variety, which I think is starting to lack a little bit on YouTube. There used to be more variety channels, but now if you do beauty, you have to stick with beauty. If you do something else, you have to make a separate channel for that. So streaming is definitely a great outlet, and I'm having tons of fun. And it's also much more personal because you can instantly, someone comes in, hi, welcome to the stream. Where are you tuning in from? You can ask them right away. You get to know your audience. And then if they have any questions about Japan and you're sitting down, you have time, just chat with them.
What are the most common questions you're getting about Japan or life here from your audience that is perhaps living all over the world, in the US or in Europe?
A lot of people ask, how did you learn Japanese? That's like one of the questions, because people want to know how did you learn it? Can I apply that? Some people ask, where would you recommend to travel to in Japan? So it can be a big variety, but usually when I stream twice a week on Twitch, on like Japan Mondays and also Saturdays, in case you're curious to tune in. And it gives me like instant response, right? And sometimes I can even look things up and go like, okay, for you, this and this might actually work better.
It's interesting to see the evolution of all those social platforms, right? Because nowadays, a lot of people make a living out of it and kind of do this as their main activity. But you see, there's always this algorithm behind it. It's changing, and you kind of suddenly you have to do only one type of content for your content to work, and you feel stuck in a niche, and then you see some people burn out. Have you interacted at all a little bit with the kind of Japan content creator community and kind of noticed an evolution there as well?
I think it's I think everyone who started like 9-10 years ago, that kind of OG community of content creators, they kind of know each other. So it's really nice to, when we meet, it's almost like old friends at this point in time, because you know of each other, or you know each other for such a long time. Well, now we have like a whole new change, because now we have short form video, which has changed the game completely. And I'm still trying to get used to that, because I'm used to creating a story and slowly telling the story over maybe the span of 8 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes or 10 minutes, to unfold the story slowly. But now the same type of story, you have to kind of pack in the shape of like 10 seconds. And I find that, honestly, a little bit challenging. And it's still a progress for me that I'm working on right now. But short form content is super fun, super entertaining. It's like bam, 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 bam. All the facts you have to bring in right at the start, instead of slowly unfolding it over time. I mean, each and everyone has their preferences, but for me, it's almost like I have to start from zero again, because it's a different way of bringing the same type of content to different audiences.
And this, I think, has also really affected the type of content done about Japan, right? Because you used to have this OG group of content creators, and we're talking mostly like English-speaking channels here, because I guess other languages will have maybe other experiences, but there were travel videos or extended vlogs about Japan, or like exploring new places. But now the pace of content creation in those quick videos of everyone just traveling, like 5 things to do in Kyoto, 5 things to do in Tokyo, go to these 3 cafes in this neighborhood. It's just like, I don't know, like a swarm of content, and kind of keeping up with this. And as a viewer, it's also really difficult to just navigate.
I'm glad that you're saying that. As a viewer, it's also difficult. As a content creator, it's definitely also been difficult, because you think if you're in for it for so long, you have like, you think, or maybe you guys might think, oh, well, they know how it's done, or you get like a special treatment by the algorithm, which is the right opposite. The longer you've been doing it, the algorithm doesn't favor you for that. So anyone who's had like millions of views can on the next day just have like, you know, a small number that they like, you wonder why, because the algorithm said, this video, we're not going to forward it to people. So the game has massively changed. And having done this, including my personal channel, which is now 13 years old, because I started that when I was still a student, there's always something different, and it will keep changing. So for example, when YouTube tried to rival with Netflix, suddenly as a content creator, you got told your videos have to be longer, make them longer. So we had to make longer videos. And suddenly I was like, oh, how do I stretch my videos? I usually just had them at like 5 minutes. Now, how do I get them to 10 minutes to actually, that's what YouTube wants and will push. So I had to find ways to get it to 10 minutes, and everyone else had to scramble and do the same. And now our rival is TikTok. So now YouTube is like, okay, focus on making short videos, focus on shorts. And suddenly everyone has to scramble and change what they were doing, because now we have to do shorts. And maybe, you know, next week something else will be the thing that we have to create, and we have no control over that. So just having been in the game for a long time doesn't make you special. It doesn't make you great. You got to still start from zero with maybe the next thing that happens.
For you now as a content creator here in Japan, and with your experience and your 9 years of doing a lot of videos, interviews, traveling across Japan, what are the things you'd like to do moving forward? What are the big new challenges you want to set yourself here in Japan?
Big new challenges. I definitely would like to grow my Twitch channel more, just because I feel like I can be my most authentic self there. There's no editing in Twitch. There is no, special cuts and things like that. I love the way of like having that beautifully pristine done product that you deliver on YouTube. That is a wonderful way of showing stuff. I love having now shorts to go like bam, 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 bam. This is something short and funny that I thought about. I love pictures on Instagram because I have like the fashion pictures up on Instagram. But each platform will want something else, and each platform you can create yourself or present yourself differently. But with the live streaming, I think it just gives me a chance to just sit down like I'm sitting down with you and talk as I'm talking. And you can see I'm like a bit of a chatterbox. It's fun to have that quick, immediate interaction and spend time with people like that.
So Twitch is kind of the next thing that you want to really spend more time on.
I think so. I do. Like, I will still do my videos on YouTube, my street interviews on Ask Japanese, my fashion videos on the Cathy Cat channel, and then obviously Instagram Reels and Instagram photos. But on Twitch, I just like that, boom, it's here now. And I, for example, recently went to Seattle, and I could, grab the internet and boom, now I'm streaming from Seattle. I do an IRL, so in real life stream in Seattle. Suddenly walking around Seattle, figuring out what it is like to be in the US and go like, wow, we're here in Seattle. And I had like my very first American drink bottle experience, and like take me along and see maybe talk with some cosplayers there. And it's so immediate. It's not you have to wait until I've edited the video and I put the video up. It's now, and you're there with me now at the same time. So that's kind of a big fun process for me to delve into. So Twitch is definitely a lot of fun.
Is there already a sort of, there's this OG Japan YouTube content creator community. Is there one for Twitch as well that is maybe different, with like a different kind of category of content creators?
If there is, I wouldn't know. I think a lot of people have recently started up in Japan, especially the IRL community has recently started up within the last couple of years. If there are some OGs, feel free to put that into the comments. But I think it's right now, actually it boomed a little bit because one content creator got featured on Japanese TV, and then more people picked it up. But Twitch used to be mainly for Western audience, but now luckily a lot of Japanese people are now joining us on Twitch and also create their content, and we have a little bit more variety going forwards. And actually this will already be over by the time that this one airs, but probably shouldn't be saying that. Okay, I was going to plug that front page on Twitch thing, but
well, I think it's the right thing to plug that.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Japan is pushing content creators and like yourself, putting you on the front page of Twitch to get more people to kind of discover what's out there, and channels like yours where you chat and engage with your audience, share your perspectives on things.
Yeah, going to Seattle, it was very interesting to see, because obviously Twitch and such is much more present in the USA. So there were like lots of content creator meetings, there were content creator associations, there were like a lot of events that tied Twitch very closely to their creators. I think Japan is really picking up with that now. So the chance for me going on the Twitch front page on September 28th is like a really great opportunity to get yourself out there. And I hope there will be a little bit more done in Japan, because obviously it's starting up right now. And I think this is always the very exciting time, because I knew how the YouTube space was starting up, and it was like all that excitement and all those great ideas are coming together. And I think that's right now happening for Twitch Japan.
So the wave is kind of picking up steam.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that there will be more events in the future. And I hope maybe in the future we get a TwitchCon in Japan. That'd be really great.
Oh, that would be cool. Let's do it in Osaka, not Tokyo.
Yes.
Everything is
by all
in
means, let's do it in Osaka.
How do you find time to do all of these things? Be on TV, stream, do YouTube videos for multiple channels, make your fashion shoots?
I don't have free time. That's how it works. You just don't. You just burn your free time. But I think if you do what you love doing, then it doesn't feel like such a chore. Sometimes I feel like I'm burning out if I do too much. But I think I've recently found like a good balance with saying, okay, I will post less on this platform so I have a little bit more energy and a little bit more time to sleep or rest. So I'm trying to be a bit more balanced about that. I got to be honest. There was a time when I did everything, like posting on all the platforms, all the time, every week, and then engage with like comments from the community, and then like doing extra streams, and then Patreon, because I also have Patreon. And it was everything at the same time until I realized, okay, I need to probably tune it down on this, on the other thing. And now I'm making sure that I regularly post on Patreon, regularly stream on Twitch, release the Ask Japanese videos and videos for my personal channel. But if I'm too busy, I have to see which one do I cut. So currently my personal channel has less videos than usual, even though that's my OG baby because it's 13 years old. But if I don't have time to create a video for that, I just have to prioritize other things. And then if I can, I'll create content for my personal channel.
Like the Cat with Beard podcast.
Exactly. That's another thing which we should be talking about because you're going to be on our podcast in a moment as well.
It looks like we're just doing one interview, but actually right behind me, Lady Beard is waiting.
Exactly.
And then we're going to be doing an interview for your podcast, which is probably going to air before all of this.
Exactly. It's going to be the other way around.
Tell me about the origin story of the Cat with Beard podcast. How did you two kind of get together and decide to, let's start talking about things together?
There was a young, inspired guy at Bunkahosa, which is a radio station, and he started to think, hey, no one's done a podcast for us yet. Like I think he had like really good ideas, and he was like, I want to get some really interesting people together. And he selected Ladybeard and me, and we were both really cool with it. We already had knew of each other before. Mm-hmm. So one day we turned up in the studio, everything, all the dials and everything were there, and boom, we started our podcast. And I think it's a good balance of like the energy and power that Ladybeard brings in, but also the little bit more like German down to earthness of like, okay, let's go back to the topic of which I'm bringing to the table. And it's probably the most colorful podcast, which is usually a word you wouldn't put in with the word podcast. We're probably the most colorful podcast of Japan.
I think you definitely are there and bring a lot of positive energy, a lot of fun guests and a lot of fun discussions to the show. So for listeners that are interested in listening to that episode, they can go over to the Cat with Beard podcast.
From Japan. Add the From Japan in there in case you can't find Cat with Beard, because otherwise you'll just find cute pictures of cats with beards.
But thank you so much, Cathy, for making time today to talk to us here on Unpacking Japan. Share your story a little bit.
Thank you for asking me.
Do you feel like we covered everything?
I think we covered. There's a lot more to cover, but hey, I have literally released over 1,500 free videos on YouTube at this point in time, and spoken with probably 100,000 Japanese people at least. So there's a lot of free content if you want to find it. It's okay if I plug that.
We will not link all the videos. We will just link the channel and people can select the ones they want. Otherwise,
exactly.
We'll be doing that for a long time.
There's a lot of stuff. So Ask Japanese, for example, then my personal channel. Twitch is Cathy Cat _TV. Instagram, same thing, Cathy Cat _TV. And Twitter, X, which I don't really use that much, but it's still Cathy Cat _TV. So that's how you can find me.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this week's episode. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.
Are you looking for another podcast episode to listen to next? If you like the one you just listened to, I'm sure you'll also enjoy the one that I've selected and linked in the description down below. Go check it out.